DEI is short for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Here's a breakdown. Diversity is ensuring the representation of all identifiers across races, gender identities, sexual orientations, religions, political beliefs, socioeconomic statuses, and more. Equity is the fair treatment of all previously stated identifiers, making sure every person in the environment has the same opportunities, resources, and support. Inclusion is making sure that the space is comfortable and welcoming to every type of person present. Everybody should feel respected and valued.
To make an informed investment decision, but that standard is not subject to delisting. The disclosure standard, though, would be.
So the idea is that every company that's listed on the NASDAQ, which amounts to several thousand companies, including Apple, Google, Amazon, so on, has to publish a DEI report every year, and this report requires one of two things. The first option is for companies to state in their report that they have 2 members on their board of directors from an underrepresented group, quote unquote, including at least 1 female, and in addition to the female, 1 person who, quote, identifies as Black, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, Alaskan Native, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, biracial, or LGBTQ+. Alternatively, companies have the option of explaining in the reports why they didn't meet the requirement. They have to publicly provide an explanation as to why they didn't meet NASDAQ's quota, which of course is intended to subject these companies to accusations of racism and bigotry and all the rest of it. So this is coercion, obviously. It's also unconstitutional and extremely comically arbitrary. For some reason, NASDAQ demands that companies have a female on the board, although they can't define the word, obviously. That's a must-have. And if you don't have a female on the board, then you can't pass. You can't pass go, you can't collect your $200. But at the same time, NASDAQ isn't insistent on having, say, a gay man on the board. That's not very important to them. If you have a Pacific Islander, that's good enough. So that basically counts as a gay guy in NASDAQ's eyes. All of the ethnic minority groups are interchangeable along with LGBT. You just put them in one basket, pick one at random, and you're fine. Go grab an Alaskan Native from the bargain bin. And if you can't find one, see if there are a couple of Native Americans on the clearance rack. I mean, that seems to be the attitude.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion are everyone's responsibility.
DEI. Diversity, equity, inclusion. That sounds nice and responsible. No wonder all big companies now require employees to get training in it.
Because we understand that racial and systemic bias have many causes, sources, and ways of showing up within each of us.
Even if that's true, do you know what American companies now do to address it? Some make ritual apologies for America's past.
We want to acknowledge that the land where the Microsoft campus is situated was traditionally occupied by the Sammamish.
By proclaiming guilt, companies try to signal that now they're virtuous.
The Snohomish, the Tulalip.
It's nice to apologize.
Yes, but what is it really doing?
Eric Smith was a diversity officer at Drew University. Now he teaches at York College. Why'd you stop being a diversity officer?
I just thought it was a useless thing. There's a better way to go about doing this.
Diversity and inclusion.
Useless or not, companies continue to pay big money for trainings.
There's a whole industry now designed to cater to companies looking for a quick way to check that box. In the U.S. in 2020, DEI was a $3.4 billion industry.
Every big company.
They feel like they have to. They have to say something. They have to signal to the world that they're doing something.
Is it effective?
No. In fact, it seems to be doing worse. It seems to be making people less likely to interact with people who are unlike them, because it's like a minefield now.
Less likely to interact.
After a training where you hear things about microaggressions, if you ask somebody what they do for a living, somehow that's racist, right? If you learn that, then why would you take a chance?
I better not talk to Eric because I might say something wrong.
Precisely. So now inclusion means I'm going to silence myself and not talk to the Black people.
All white people are racist.
Some trainings are just divisive and dumb.
I believe that white people are born into not being human.
This is extreme, I take it.
It is extreme, but it's becoming more of the norm.
These slides were shown at a Coca-Cola diversity training.
The thesis of this training was try to be less white. They're talking about arrogance and things like that. That is by no means a white thing. The point is to demonize the other side as much as possible.
And absurdly, diversity trainings don't even do what they're supposed to do. This Harvard professor analyzed studies of them.
Sadly enough, I did not find one single study which has found that diversity training, in fact, leads to more diversity.
In fact, the Harvard Business Review reports 5 years after diversity training, the share of black women managers actually decreased.
It's not about data, it's about a power grab.
A power grab that starts in schools.
Melt to the steel bars of racism and white language supremacy.
This expert tells teachers it's racist to teach traditional English.
If you use a single standard to grade your students' languaging, you engage in racism. You actively promote white language supremacy, which is the handmaiden to white bias in the world.
Smith was in the audience.
I heard that, thought it was a bit misguided.
So Smith wrote a long and thoughtful response saying it's a disservice to minority kids not to teach standard English. For that, he was attacked.
We are professors in communication. I thought we could communicate. I was so wrong.
Instead of a discussion, people called you racist. Do you enjoy using Western modes of argument to invalidate people of color? Check your privilege.
What they saw in me was a bigger threat than anything they've seen before. A black person saying it's okay to teach black students standardized English.
An academic named Eve complained about the harm Smith consistently perpetuates. Other academics joined in to coddle Eve. Eve spent tremendous labor, physically, intellectually, and emotionally, to write his response, and most probably took him extra time to recover from that labor. It's like they're victims everywhere.
Yes, that's the point. You have to perpetuate the victimhood. That's part of the narrative.
The DEI is just a rebranded version of hating white people.
DEI, in this case, stands for divisive, erroneous, and insidious.
DEI, which stands for didn't earn it.
Discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination.
Federal diversity, equity, and inclusion staff members are preparing to lose their jobs. Yesterday, President Trump's administration moved to end affirmative action in federal contracting and directed that all federal DEI workers be put on paid leave and eventually be laid off. The moves follow an executive order that President Trump signed on his first day, ordering a sweeping dismantling of the federal government's diversity and inclusion programs. Trump has called the programs discrimination and insisted on restoring strictly merit-based hiring.
Our CBS.
Okay, what's your question?
Do you have any reaction to federal DEI employees being put on leave at the end of the day?
The federal DEI employees being put on leave?
Yeah.
I think the American people have spoken very clearly that that the best way to stop discriminating against people on the basis of race or gender is to stop discriminating against people on the basis of race and gender. The truth is the American people don't think about race or gender nearly as much as some folks in Washington want to pretend. They think more about merit. They think about character. They understand that souls have no color. And most Americans approach race and gender in a commonsensical way. They think to a bear, we all taste like chicken. In the past, I personally don't believe that race or gender should be used to either help a person or to harm a person. The past 4 years under President Biden, it was the exact opposite. And I think what you're going to see under President Trump reacting to the feelings of the American people is to go back to a race-neutral, gender-neutral system based on merit.